Good morning. On behalf of the Publications Office of the European Union, welcome to this eSender workshop, and apologies for this delayed start due to some technical issues with WebEx. I'm Luca Martinelli, the new head of unit of the TED and new public procurement unit at the Publications Office. Since 1st of February, I took over from Manuela Cruz, that for sure you have met, and this was in the context of a reorganization of the Publications Office. I'm very keen on starting collaborating with you. I hear some noise in the background, so please, I would ask everyone to mute their microphone. This is our first meeting after the so-called tolerance period that ended on the 31st of January with having eForms 100% and the switch off of eSend tools and all the reception and dissemination chain for all the forms. I would like to give you some background information concerning the aim of this meeting, a quick summary, and also some organization aspects. So eForms, we know it by now, it's a long journey. This will stay with us for a long time. And we had several workshops to prepare the switchover. And in terms of format of these meetings, we plan to have eSenders workshop regularly. We have planned four for the coming year. Beyond this one, there will be one in June, one in September, and one in December. In a way, we are merging the previous eSender seminar, which was annual, and the eForm technical workshops into this format of eSender workshops. So 4 eSender workshops per year. At the same time, our colleagues of DG GROW of the European Commission, that, as you know, are in charge of the policy, will keep the eForm workshops that probably many of you are attending. This looks in particular more at the policy layer of eForms, and of course we'll make sure also to provide input to this eForm policy workshop based on the result of the technical eSender workshop that we are holding with you. We are also having webinars concerning e-notices. We had one e-notices 2 last week, and we will also have a users workshop as usual. The next one will be on the 17th of April. So those of you who are reusers of TED data, please note the 17th of April reuser workshop. Let me say something about where we are today and how we will move. So we had over the last period 3 D-days concerning eForms. The first one was the 14th of November 2022, when for the first time tools were ready to receive eForms. Last year, 25th of October, eForms became compulsory. And, you know, we had this tolerance period, which I already mentioned, that ended on the 31st of January. At that date, the majority of member states and eSenders were ready to submit eForms, but not all of them. And we are aware that many of you are still working at implementing eForms, and in those countries, buyers are submitting currently through e-notices 2. So we will continue. You have our commitment to provide you the best possible technical resources to help this transition, and to continue supporting you in the implementation, in the changes that will take place during the life cycle of eForms. We have the SDK, software development kit, which is a very, very important tool, more other types of documentation. We put at disposal a test preview environment. We have the GitHub discussions, the help desk, of course, and workshops like this. Our spirit is to be listening to you. This is the main goal of today's meeting, and to take on board the comments, suggestions, and improvements. So my colleagues, Carl Ferrand, which you know well, and Yanis Rouzochatsakis will guide us this morning through the news, latest developments, and plans. We will have, so this morning, these two main presentations from until midday. Then we will break and we will resume in the afternoon for a question and answer session for another 2 hours, 2 to 4. The meeting will be recorded and of course we made available all presentations on our websites and also a summary with questions and answers. Sorry again for this problem. We had to start. This is a fully online workshop, and there are some rules, as you know, to make it properly working technically. So microphones off, cameras off. We will use Slido to interact with you. You can post questions, and we'll also have a survey at the end. I would like to thank, as I already mentioned, Carl, Yanis, and the team that is supporting us in the publications office, Jenny, Panos, and Marco. With this, I think I will give the floor to Carl Ferrand. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning. You can hear me okay. Sorry again for the hiccups this morning. So it means we'll try and keep the presentations tight, but that should be okay. If you go to Slido, we'll just get you connected because we have some questions for you as well today. So if my colleagues can launch the Slido. So, okay, Panos, you got it. Yep. Okay. Yes, sorry, switch back to Slido. Thank you, Panos and Jenny. So where you're coming from, yes, it's all over the wider Europe. We know we have Germany centers. I'll touch it in my presentation, but indeed, when we talk about eSenders, formally, we're talking about those of you who submit to us directly through the API. But we know in several countries you don't always submit to us directly. You might go through a hub, like in Germany, there's a big hub. But of course, many of you have to implement eForms to submit to your hub, who then submit to us. So we have these layers. And in some countries, there's a single hub. In some countries, it's a decentralized system. And there are also commercial operators in most countries as well. Okay, let's switch to the next question. See what happens. So this is just to get a feeling of how it's gone. For those of you who've gone live, we know that some of you are still implementing. In some cases, if you're a commercial operator, you just enter in the market. In some countries, it's a problem because there's a central hub, which is difficult. But we know the bulk of you are live on eForms and are no longer submitting the old standard forms. So, okay, it's good to know that there's a reasonable bunch. Things went okay. I think 7, 8, 9 is quite promising. in some cases, yes, it has been quite hard. There's also a gap between what we see as implementers and then the experience of our users as well. So from e-notices to webinars, we know it's quite hard on the users, even if technically we might be okay. Okay, thanks for the slider. So keep your page open because we'll have other questions later on. It's going to be the same link all day. Okay, so where were we? Yes, spring. So it's springtime. It's sunny here in Luxembourg. I'm actually in France across the border. I found a nice springtime bunny rabbit, which I discovered was AI generated. So at least that's one thing AI can do. AI cannot do eForms yet. So that's why we're here today. And spring started yesterday, I discovered on the 19th. So here we are. I'm also hoping the Easter eggs don't hide any bad surprises, but we know eForms is full of surprises, and we try to keep those to a minimum. It's not what we're here for. So today I'll tell you where we are for implementation, SDK 1.11, which is still ongoing, and to clarify what we shared with you quite recently about the SDK lifespans and the roadmap. So this is a big deal because for almost everyone, there's SDK updates this year for the first time. So having done the challenge of the first implementation, the challenge is to upgrade. And the rest some updates about eNotices 2 and other information for you. So as you know, eSend tool closed for submissions on the 31st of January. So the applications had been left open beyond the mandatory deadline on the 25th of October, as agreed with the European Commission. And we saw that quite a few were leaving it quite late. Some of these will have been eNotices 2 users in some countries where there's no eSender or few eSenders. So many of those left it late. But we have over 150,000 forms successfully published since November. Obviously, it only became, the volumes only started around September last year. That's when the bulk started to come in online overview. And we can see the past 30 days, pretty much the big volume has been coming since the 1st of February when it's 100%. Very roughly, it's about 3,000 notices per day you come. So that's now that we publish as soon as possible in most cases, it's no longer the 5-day fixed publication period, which meant that the publication on the official journal tend to bunch around different days because we had the weekends and notices were published before or after according to when they had been submitted. So now it's pretty much 3,000 every day. We counted how many accounts you are, how many you are of eSenders. So these are your accounts that you have created in the developer portal and who are actually the account that's submitting through the API. So there's 47 of you, but as I said earlier, there's many of you in a way behind the scenes, one step removed from us, who also are implementing eForms. So we will, it's all part of the bigger community. So as we say, a few of you are still moving to eForms. So thanks to in registration telling us who you are. So we know for sure that well, some of them we know that you're running late, and some of you might be new entrants in the market. So you might not have an entire country dependent on you, but you are still implementing and you will go live when you can start offering the service. The effect in some cases is we have plenty of buyers using eNotices too. So some of your buyers who can't use your application yet, or only partially, we are seeing them on eNotices too. So that's so I'm very grateful that most of you are out there because it means they're using your platform. Otherwise, we'd have many more on eNotices too. But yeah, eForms is the new normal. So in the end, when we talk about eForms, we're just talking about the procurement forms. That's why we renamed these workshops, because it's no longer eForms technical workshops. It's just eSender daily life we're talking about now. So where are we with SDK 1.11? You're probably asking. So we have a release candidate, which we have, which you can see on GitHub if you want to see what's coming. You can even compare the differences with the SDK Explorer, which Yanis might touch on later on, if you want to compare the differences. This is a very rough overview of some highlights I just picked out to try and give you an idea of the scope. So there's no big changes regulatory, but obviously every change has its impact. So from a schema, there's just one change where the business term which is used to link to the modified contracts. When you're doing a contract modification, this is exclusively a contract modification. There was one business term to link, and now we split them into two. One just to identify the contract itself, the section in the previous one that you're changing, and a separate business term if you're modifying other sections. So it was to give more transparency. In the rules, there's some of them you might recognize because you might have raised the issues. I try to pick them up. So we have some rules which don't allow you to do certain things after the deadlines, the submission deadlines of contract notice. So we have loosened those rules for cancel intent and some changes. The rules for which procedures can use accelerated procedures are clarified. PT22 is an internal identifier which is made optional. We made it mandatory because that's how you can link, you can know you're talking about the same lot in different notices through the procedure. But we were told that legally it wasn't in the regulations, so it could not be made mandatory. But practically, we encourage you to make it mandatory on your side so that your buyers put something in as the identifier for each lot. So it's not the technical identifier, which can vary through the procedure, but the identifier that the buyer gives a lot or a procedure. One which is interesting, the email and the phone number are now optional for all organizations except for buyers. So this will address concerns for personal data. You know, if your supplier is an individual, you probably don't want to give too much personal data about them. So that was clarified with the Commission, and it was made more optional. And we've added further conditional mandatory combinations. So most of them are the relatively obvious one. If you say this, then you have to provide that. If you provide that, you cannot provide this. So relatively simple combinations. This is the last wave of these conditional mandatory rules that we had. So we had many rules that we had deactivated that we didn't go live with back in November 22, and we've progressively added them. And now we've added all the ones that we had planned. In a way, it's the last wave of additional rules. In the code list, there's one which might be interesting when you say how many items you're procuring. There was a very strange list of measurement units which had been created, which was very useful. But one of them that was missing was to say I'm buying 23 pieces of whatever I happen to be buying. So it allows you to give the volume, because it forced, when you put a number, you had to put a unit, and the units weren't very useful. So you just want to say a number of whatever, my CPV codes. So that will help some people to provide this optional field, but it makes more sense now. For those of you who are interested in the transport passenger regulation, they're not technically eForms, but they're included in the SDK. And we've just made sure that they have the right direct award justifications and procedure types. So just to make sure if anyone is using those, that they're complete now. And then just regular updates, notice types, fields, and nodes to improve them. Some changes to the view templates for the viewer, PDF, HTML. In particular, handling of how winner sections are handled. And labels and translations. So these OPP, OPT fields were missing descriptions. For the business terms, the descriptions are the same as the regulation. So in eNotices 2, we use them as tooltips, but we were missing these additional fields, which often for technical reasons didn't exist in the regulation. We were also making sure that all translations, there's no labels untranslated, and we've improved some of the rule messages. Some were either confusing, occasionally some actually said the wrong thing, but we tried to improve the structure because they're difficult to understand. So this is just a quick view. I probably said too much. When you can look at the RC1, which is pretty much got everything. There's not too many changes that would come afterwards, but we're testing this. We hope to get it out after Easter, so that's early April. So bear with us, and then you can get your hands on it. But you can already see the scope. Okay, SDK lifespans. This is a big deal, we know, because almost all of you have gone live. It was a major effort last year, and no sooner have you gone live is your SDK version will expire, and you will have to upgrade again. So we had many concerns for this, but there's also just the reality of how long it takes to upgrade, especially the first time. So we've extended the expiry dates of the SDK versions, but the compromise we found, because we can keep SDK versions active for longer at the publications office, but we also say we will patch them. So we will improve the labels, the view templates, and sometimes some rules which might be blocking. So some of the rules in SDK 1.11 will be backported. We have to identify the ones which have maybe some legal implications that we have blocked in the old ones. We have to loosen them. But that patching effort is significant. So if we keep SDK versions open for a long time, the patching becomes unsustainable. So the way we have approached this is to say that as a default, every SDK version has a standard lifespan, which is 12 months. And after those 12 months, we stop patching. But we can continue to allow notice to be submitted in those SDK versions, which is what we call the extended lifespan. And these dates are longer. So for example, if you're on 1.6, we didn't switch it off a couple of weeks ago. We've given you about 4 more months to upgrade. But it does mean when SDK 1.11 comes out, we are not going to patch 1.6. So if you see, that's the effect, because you assume in the final months that you're switching, the solution is to upgrade if there's something missing for you. Again, 1.7 we'll see won't get patched with the next SDKs and so on. So in general, there's about a bit more than 4 months for each one. We've switched them to the end of the month. It's a bit easier to follow. And these ones on the 28th of February. Why February? Because we'll see in the regulation amendment, it should be used by everyone by the end of February, but we'll get to that in a second. But please read this page, the active version page. Read it in detail so you understand it. The page does have this table for information, but what really counts is the active range, which you can query by API in CVS. Also, what we did was we made sure that preview and production have the same CVS version as SDK versions and these same dates. Before we had them slightly separate, now we just keep them the same. So we hope this helps you plan your year. So how soon you need to be switched off. If you're really stuck, get in touch. Warn us if you're going to be stuck. We don't intend to extend these because we want people to keep up with the upgrading, but we know there are some exceptional circumstances which might need to be taken on account. Okay, and the roadmap. So I haven't told you when we're going to switch off the existing SDKs. You want to know what's coming up. So 1.11 yes, that would be in April, and the end of patches would be in April next year. But we would want people move on after that. So SDK 1.12 is hopefully also in April. This is an exceptional one, which Yanis will mention afterwards, about adding the business entities information inside the SDK, which will allow to identify the different objects and to be able to refer to them technically in the SDK. From a business point of view, it will be based and identical to SDK 1.11. So Yanis will explain that that approach. The idea is we have a version that you could start using with business entities if you want to try them out earlier and to check that it's working as it needs for you. The release after that will be 1.13 by the end of May. Why the end of May is because the 2023 amendment, the one that came out in December last year, explicitly says that we should have some additional fields for the Foreign Subsidies Regulation, FSR, and the IPI, the International Procurement Instrument, which are two pieces of legislation from last year that may affect your buyers. For IPI, we'll confirm if we will implement it for May, because at the Commission, the instruments have not been set up, so the legislation behind it still has to come. And if there's no legislation, we can't, for example, have a code list that goes with it. So that might drop out. And the regulation, the amendment also has some changes for exclusion and selection criteria. These are not mandatory for May, but we think it would be useful to include them sooner rather than later, because these are pain points for the buyers, and the changes aren't too heavy. Then the next SDK would be the big one in terms of regulatory change. So everything else in that amendment, which the big part are the voluntary forms, so E1 to E6. So these voluntary forms are the below threshold forms for planning, competition, and result. There's prior market consultation, so right at the start of a procedure, and there's contract completion right at the end of the procedure. And E6 is contract modification for the defense regulation. So that's a new one, just to bring the defense regulation up, the defense directive up to equality with the others for contract modification. So all of these forms are voluntary. We know in some member states this has been long overdue. The amendment, as a way, legalized, formalized these forms, and that's what we want to have by 1.14. The deadline is the SDK by October, because they must be available by November. If we can bring that date forward, that would be great. We know lots of people want it, but we're not going to commit any earlier than our legal obligation, just to give us that option, and we don't want to raise any false expectations out there. And EED, this is the Energy Efficiency Directive that got recast, that also adds some fields, so that will come also later this year. And SDK2, because of these regulatory changes, SDK2, which there's an alpha which is available, that with changes to the EFX grammar. So if you use an EFX, SDK2 and EFX2 was very interesting. Due to all this, we will do SDK2 after we've got the regulatory changes out of the way. So it's a little bit on hold. So we're going to focus on the other parts first. But be aware, after this big SDK, which is SDK1, once you're all on that, the next SDKs would be SDK2. So again, if you're not using EFX directly, you won't be too affected, or not at all. If you use an EFX, then you have to be aware of it. So what's in the amendment? So it got published just before Christmas last year. It has all these changes I've just mentioned. DigiGrow have put out an Excel with the track changes. One good thing about this amendment, there's no such thing as Annex 2 to the regulation and the extended annex in an Excel that was on the internet, on the European Commission websites. Now the table 2 in the regulation and the Excel which is out there are the same. So those CM, EM, conditional mandatory, existing mandatory fields are now in the same Excel, and they're also in the regulation. So there's no inconsistency. And also the Excel has a tab with track changes. In Excel, there's no such thing as track changes, but you'll see in yellow the differences. So if I have it, sorry, I'll just show you quickly because it's very visual. This one, if you can see that. So this is the annex that you all know and love. For better, for worse, it doesn't have everything, but it gives you a good idea. So here, for example, exclusion grounds and selection criteria. This is the new clean version. And if I switch, I can see in yellow what has changed. So some BTs, there's a BT that been removed and the yellow one which has been added. So then you can see everything that's in the pipeline for this year. So that's going to be the December one. Sorry, the October one. FSR and IPI. So the Commission also, for the Foreign Subsidies Regulation International Procurement Instrument, they are writing guides. So from a business and policy point of view, but also referring to what the different business terms mean, what rules might be behind it. So this is really helpful for us to implement, but it also gives you some words to describe it and not just some SDK elements that will appear at some point in May. So if you read these guides, DG GROW, the Commission are talking with the policy groups, so the expert group on e-procurement. Some of you are members, some of you are not. So, and there you can see what is being discussed at a policy level, and it's all on a GitLab instance hosted by the Commission. And they also have issues. So a bit like our GitHub issues for SDK, there's an equivalent one from a policy, from a business point of view, which you can also follow. So if you're interested in seeing what's on the horizon, what sort of discussions are happening out there, even if you're not a member of the member state groups, you can still keep up with the discussions. So yeah, and also these guides could be very helpful to provide to your users, or translate or summarize in case people are asking. So this is great. And yes, we're trying to encourage the Commission to have more guides for lots of other aspects of eForms in general. So one of the member states says maybe some guides on framework agreements, some guides on dynamic purchasing systems, because the users need some guidance how to use them and how to use them in eForms. So that would be very helpful. Okay, meanwhile, on our TED applications, what has changed? So eNotices 2, you are API users and you should remain API users. We've often said don't go in through the web interface of eNotices 2 because your notices won't behave as expected. That's not what's intended. But you might notice that we now have an expected publication date, which is information that existed in our back office in TED Monitor, the application behind the scenes. Is now that information is now shared with eNotices, because when a buyer or you systematically say publish as soon as possible, you don't know at that moment when your notice is going to be published on TED. If you submit in the morning and your notice is valid, there's no lawfulness manual check, you can be pretty sure it's going to be tomorrow's official journal, if tomorrow is a working day. But if you send something in the afternoon, you're not sure if you will have caught the export. So every afternoon there's an export. It can happen at any time between midday and midnight. At that point, when you say as soon as possible, you don't know if you caught the export or not. So the expected publication date will tell you if which OJS publication date you will catch. And then you will get notified again. It will switch to published on that date, no later than 9 o'clock on the date of publication. So that information, we also want to improve that for the email notification we will send to the buyers, and you can also query it through the API, so that can be useful. So that's that can be something you might want to use. Also, the email notifications, we want to improve them. The structures are still a little bit incomplete or ugly in some cases, and that would send back the publication date and the publication ID on TED once it's in published status. So the 8 digits hyphen the that publication ID. Just so you know what's happened with our users, so the people you don't have to care about because you have your own users. We have about 14,000 eNotices 2 users, mainly from Poland, Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and France. Because there are no eSenders in the country, or not many eSenders, or it's a decentralized setup where buyers can choose to use an eSender or can come directly to eNotices 2. In general, it's always better to use one of your services, eSenders, because you know your business. You can integrate it with a broader e-procurement service, which is much more complete, where you have a lot of the information. Your job is not just to publish, you are offering many more services. You can make sure it's more closely aligned with the national legislation, whereas eNotices 2 offers everything. So for example, if you're an eSender, you can choose to not use group of lots, which is not very useful. In eNotices 2, we have to offer every possible variant of eForms, which just makes life harder for the end user. So if you can simplify things for your users, please go ahead. We don't always manage. So we've been having many webinars this month. As you can imagine, many people waited to the last minute. And so on the 1st of February, many people were panicking, discovering eForms for the first time because they hadn't been keeping up or there was no support. So last week, this week, we've had webinars with hundreds of people. Some of you might have come along to see what we do with Notice 2, if it helps you to understand certain aspects, like rules and validation errors, which are by far the most difficult part. And the recordings and the questions and answers we make online. So there could be some information that our users ask, which the answers might be relevant for your users as well. We're aware of performance issues. So there have been some improvements for CVS, and we have some we need to do for the TED Viewer API, if you happen to call that directly. So that's also, we're aware of that, so it's not something that is forgotten. The TED Help Desk has been very busy with all these eNotices 2 web users. So these 14,000 people have been sending hundreds of emails. What they've done, we've set up a mailbox just for eNotices 2 web users to so that if you contact the TED Help Desk, the help desk can respond a bit quicker. So, but yes, you might be waiting a while for. You might even wait a week before you get any response from the help desk. And then separately, which is the result of everything we do for procurement notices, is we publish everything on TED. And you might have noticed there was a new TED website that went live on the 29th of January, which was kind of an unfortunate coincidence with the end of with submissions of the old forms. But that's the way things turned out. But that is, it's a nice new website, and I particularly recommend checking out the search, because now TED indexes all the eForms fields directly. You can do some very sophisticated advanced searches, whereas before there was only a subset of fields that could be searched and indexed. So check it out. Okay, a bit of housekeeping. So who does what and what we recommend or what we've noticed that you're asking. So if your users or your clients or even providers of data ask for support, you are the first point of support. So that's part of the deal. You submit to us, but you make sure that people ask you first. If then you have a question, by all means, we will help you so that you can get back to your buyers or your clients. If you contact the TED Help Desk, we will just tell you to go back and figure it out for yourself first. So at least do the first digestion of the problem. In some cases, we can't even help you. So if it's something happening in your buyer's application and your application, we don't even know what the issue might be. Notice author email is a parameter in the API. When you submit a notice, you provide an email. We expect this to be the buyer because when we respond to your submission, that email will get that notification. I know some of you put your own email and you get them all yourself and you figure out how to tell your buyers. That's okay, but we personally prefer that you have a real notice of their email. If we need to contact them and say there's something wrong or something got blocked, we want to email the buyer, not you. Because if we email your functional mailbox, you might ignore it. Just a reminder that so dynamic rules are not implemented. So dynamic rules are the ones that check between notices. But just because we're not checking, you can still make sure that on your side, in your applications, that you make sure the workflows work. So for example, you cannot publish a change notice until the previous one is published. Like any notices do, we make sure that the user cannot do that unless the notice is in published. There's a reuser of data has said the procedure IDs, I can't remember in which country, but the procedure IDs didn't make sense because you had multiple contract notices all in the same procedure ID. So try and use procedure ID to link the planning, competition, and award notices together in a logical way. eSend tool has been closed for submissions anyway. We kept it open for another 3 months in case you need to still query it or if you want to get your data out of it. But it will actually go offline on the 30th of data, and we will, tidy up and delete what is there. The old eSenders wiki is still available, but it's frozen, so we don't update it anymore. We'll just keep it online until the end of the year, just in case as a point of reference for what was done before with the old forms. Developer portal profiles, so thanks for keeping those up to date. Provide the information you have. It helps us know who you are. We have a reasonable idea, but this is like basic core information about you. And make sure to add additional emails. So normally your login would be more like your functional, your grouped login. If you put additional emails, your personal ones, if you want to get an email, if there's any downtime events, if you've got something big to tell you, like we chose to inform you about the lifespans because that was important. You can also have developer portals in preview, in the preview environment. We cleaned them up last week for anyone who didn't have a profile. So your developers, they can exist in preview, and that's a much more flexible environment. We will also inform them about downtime in preview particularly, and invite them to events like this. So there it's much more relaxed, but yeah, you do need to create a profile when you create a new one. So at least put something like, I'm a developer here, I do this, just so we know who you are. It's a bit easier. So keep up with the documentation. So the docs, tedeuropa.eu, and the page about preview, if there's any changes there, announcements there. The SDK itself for the releases, we will only announce them on GitHub now. So, we don't announce on the wiki or the old CMAP page. So SDK comes out on GitHub, and that's why it's announced. You can watch and follow as needed. And a point about the preview environment. So we keep it the same as production. Also, like I say, the SDK validity range is the same now. There might be just 1 or 2 days difference as we deploy things. But again, we know that the export had got blocked the other week, which got unblocked. Don't put anything critical, assuming that preview is going to be working. We know it's really important for testing, but yeah, it's an application that's provided as is. we don't get the same technical support. We don't have any contractual support in the same way as we do in production. So even if we need to ask to get support for software or hosting, it takes longer to fix it. It's just not maintained at the same level. So, but you have something which is in production, so it's a playground which never existed before at that level. Okay, just to finish off, so I don't eat into too much of Yannis's time. So what we do? So we have to support those of you who still need to go live, especially those where your central hub or there's a lot of dependencies on you, but also those of you who are entering the market. The more the merrier. I think it's good. We know it's a big deal this year for all of you to upgrade the SDK version. So thanks for telling us what your plans are, which SDK you're targeting, and also for your difficulties. So what are the biggest challenges you have for testing complexity, the SDKs that keep coming? So as before, we say we have SDKs keep changing, they keep improving, but you pick the SDK you want to use. So each SDK itself is stable. But yes, we know there are issues and we fix them as we go along. So the SDK will continue to evolve. We still have the support, the documentation, the tools, but keep asking questions. It's okay, you ask all the questions you need, the feedback, your contribution. So for example, the SDK Explorer, which is out there. If you want to contribute with some code, that helps. If there's functions you need which are needed, we know there are lots of developers out there. We can work on things together. So please keep in touch. We know there's an issue with translations. So there are, as I said, everything is translated. There's another question if everything is translated correctly. So based on SDK 1.11, we want to work with the member states through the Commission and the groups they have to have, I would say, one contact per language, collect feedback, and then implement it into the SDKs so we can improve them with your support. Well, it's probably more for the other meeting and accept with the Commission. If you are involved with translations, it's going to be really important that you translate them faithfully so that from the English, you don't change the meaning of the original. So we once got some requests for translations and the message was talking about lots and the translation talked about procedure. Those are two different things. You have to make sure you stick to the original one. So if anyone is helping with translation, make sure you don't deviate from meaning. And it's a little bit hard for us. We translated back with machine translation back into English to see if the translation makes sense because they look very different. And we noticed that it deviated. So there will also be a temptation in languages which are shared across different countries to use national terms, which might not be the same in every country. So that is something we'll have to see. For those of you who have your own language and you don't share it with anyone, it'll be a bit easier. As Luca mentioned at the beginning, we're going to have 3 more workshops. So I think it's the 20th of June, maybe summer, and September, December, again online. We published them already. The TED Reuse workshop, there's a website. The website hasn't been updated yet to announce this, but many of you might have got an email to save the date. So just so you hold it. Some of you are TED reusers, most of you are not. And then I think we might have mentioned this one last time, but those of you who were around back in 2018, there was a superpowers public procurement data event, and it's happening again at the end of April. It's in Brussels, will be the event, but you can also attend online. So you can register online for that event. And some of the eSenders will have a session about eForms implementation. Thanks to some of you who will present there on the first day. And I've been asked to moderate, so yes, you can be honest, but we know it's been difficult. but the lessons learned, the feedback is going to be valuable, and it's important to hear how eForms has affected you. It's implementation is quite different from policy. Okay, I think I've finished, and I won't take up any more time. So yes, the usual links, docs, GitHub, help desk, and these workshops. So just I'll just show you some of the screens. Version lifespan is there. SDK Explorer. SDK release candidate 1. The implementation regulation from December. The PDF, the Excel you can reach. The guides for FSR. Guides for IPI. This is what the Commission is producing. The other issues that have been discussed. GitLab 1. That's our workshops. That's the reusers one. Doesn't have the 17th of April yet. And this is the public procurement data superpowers one in Brussels. Okay, that's it for me. So I'll hand it over to, probably hand over directly to Yanis if you're there, and I will be quiet for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Hello, everyone. Well, I don't see you. Hopefully, maybe we'll see some of you in our event next month in Brussels. It always feels awkward when you speak and you don't see the audience. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see my presentation.
All good.
Good. Let me just resize things here a little bit, make some room. Can I make this disappear? Okay, I'll make it disappear like this. Okay, so we've met before. You know that I work with the team that creates the SDK in the Publications Office. And today I'll give you a quick update on what's happening with SDK2. Not much. I think that already mostly covered what I want to say. I'll talk to you a little bit about the SDK Explorer for those who missed it, and I'll give you a quick demo. And then I will talk about a new thing that we plan to introduce in SDK 1.12. Yeah, just let you know what's coming and why, and possibly if you have questions, we can discuss them later. So, quick update on the SDK 2. Everybody was expecting it like a year ago, last summer. And the truth is that we tried to release it last summer. We were hoping that if we could get SDK2 out well before the October deadline, it would be that there would be a chance that the eSenders would jump on it. But then we realized that this was not a real possibility. Everybody was focused on other stuff. So then we stopped the effort, and it was on hold for quite a while, and we're just restarting now. The heavy lifting has been done already for SDK2, but still there is a lot of work to be done. We're currently working on the new view templates, and also we will need to do the complex rules. The SDK2, I should remind everybody that the plan is to only change FX. We will try not to change anything else. Probably a couple of other changes might creep in, but the main idea is not change anything but EFX if possible, so that we can improve the visualization of notices, the view templates, and that we can add the complex rules that are needed. Complex rules are rules that we need in order to control values from other notices mostly. So rules that reference values that, for example, a rule that might check if a procedure identifier is valid and the procedure already exists, things like that. Now, as we work on this, we will do more pre-releases. The SDK2 Alpha 1 that is in GitHub doesn't have much value in it. It has a very old version of the metadata that was not updated. But as the work progresses, we will do more pre-releases. The only thing that you can really look at the Alpha 1 version of the SDK now that is for quite some time in GitHub is, of course, the EFX grammar. Everything else is, I think, 1.7, 1.8 or something of the SDK. The metadata is an old SDK. The final release, I don't know exactly. Based on the schedule, the realistic thing is either end of 24 or first quarter of 25. There are several things that affect the final release date, not only the work that is remaining, but other considerations. So as soon as we have something more specific, we will let you know. And that's it about SDK 2. Now, SDK Explorer. What's the SDK Explorer? We talked about it last time we met in December 23, and we released the first version in the end of January. It's, or we already know that it's a new tool that can compare any two versions of the SDK. And the idea behind it is, first of all, to improve the visibility and also help to improve the understanding of the contents of each version of the SDK, and also to highlight the changes between any two versions of the SDK with the intention of helping eSenders that want to migrate from one version to another, from any version to any version, to see what are the differences and can have a an assessment of what the migration might entail for them. The idea was, of course, to make this usable by both technical and non-technical users. I will do a quick demo here. I'm not sure how many people have already seen it, but I will do a quick demo anyway. I have not scripted this, so we'll take it as spontaneously. So there is a link here for the SDK Explorer in the developer documentation site, so you can find it easily. If you come here for the first time, you can use the quick tour. I'm not going to run the quick tour. So basically, there are few things that you need to know about this. On the top right here, you can select two SDK versions to compare. So you select an older version. Let's try to compare, for example, let's try to compare 1.9 with 1.10. That's okay. 1.9, the latest 1.9 with the latest 1.10. So somebody is in 1.9 and wants to go to 1.10. You can see here a number of tabs, and basically they are the different folders of the SDK. In the Fields tab, you will see a tree of all the nodes and the fields that are in Fields.json. So basically, this shows you Fields.json. in a tree structure, so it represents the actual structure. And you will see that there is the changes are highlighted. So the green ones are added. Whatever is green has been added in 110. Whatever is red has been removed in 110. Okay, exists in 19 but doesn't exist in 110. And whatever is this, I don't know, lavender color is has been modified. You can use this quick filtering. So these are the things that are added. So there's this node that has been added, and 2 fields. The things that are removed, this node has been removed, and the things that are modified, you see the fields. You see the fields that are modified, and then when you click in each one, you can see here on the right what has changed. So we have all the properties for the field. And you can see, for example, that this one, a rule about being forbidden, used to be what is in the red value, and now is what is in the green value. You can have a visual comparison. You can also see that it's now mandatory. And so you can explore the changes like this. There's also this compact view that just collapses anything that has not changed. So it only shows you whatever changed. I'm sure you will figure it out. It's fairly straightforward. A nice thing that you can do here is there is a little bit of a search, so you can type a business term, or so I don't know. P22, is there a business term like that? Yes. So it searches. You can find a business term like this. You can also do a little bit more complicated stuff. You can say, for example, what was not mandatory but now is mandatory. So these are fields that were not mandatory, but now they are, like this one or that one. So I typed basically the property name and the plus, which means added. If I add a minus, these used to be mandatory, but they're not anymore. And then you can put a star here for any kind of change in mandatory. So you can do tricks like that. More details you can read here. I'm not going to go through everything, but if you read this, it's simple enough. You can also combine terms like when you do a Google search, so with and or. I think it's very straightforward. You figure it out. Likewise, you have comparison in the notice types. So it shows you whatever changed across notice types. So for example, between these 2 versions of the SDK, X01 and X02 have not changed because they have this white background here, whereas there are changes in all the other notice types. And then if you go and compare 2 of them, I don't know, let's find one notice type that I hear a lot about, notice type 16. You can still go in and see the structure of all the fields and groups that are in the notice. And you can filter in and see exactly what was modified. So this is what was modified in notice type 16 between these 2 versions of the SDK. Likewise, you can go for code lists. It compares on fly, and it works. You see that there is this progress bar. It compares all the code lists, and it will highlight the ones that have changed. I don't see many changes, so let's do a compact view. So this one was added, and these 2 were modified. And then if you want to see exactly what was modified, you click a comparison. In this case, you look at the changes directly in the text file. Likewise, you can compare the schemas and see if anything changed. So there are changes into these 2 schema files, the same for schematron files. You can see which files have been added, removed, modified, and so on. The same for the translations, the same idea, same interface. So it compares the two versions and directly gives you what's changed. You can filter it by language. Oh, CPU usage is high. Cancel. I think you get the idea. And then you can click this button to actually see which translations have changed. And the same idea for the view templates. So apparently there are not many changes between 1.9 and 1.10. But this is because of patching. Basically, something 1.9.2 is patched. So the view templates have been updated, and there are not many differences. For convenience, you have also the release notes here of the version that you're migrating to. So that's the main idea. I'm not going to give you any other details, but we encourage you to try it, use it, and give us any ideas of how we can improve it. And if anyone wants to contribute with writing codes, you're very, very welcome. So moving on. Give me a second to find my presentation again. There we are. I hope everything is going okay. It's hard to get any kind of feedback now, but I will assume that everything is going okay. So the next, business entities. Now, what are business entities? And what was this that Carl was saying about SDK 1.12? I'll tell you about SDK 1.12 at the end. Let's see what are business entities. It will seem a little bit strange in the beginning. So business entities basically are a way of grouping fields, which sounds already a little bit silly, but you will understand as I explain. So business entities tell us how the different fields combine to form a business concept. Now this is too vague, but I will make it more clear. They not only tell us which fields work together to inform a business concept, but they also establish links and connections between the different business concepts. And it's easy, of course, for anybody to start wondering, okay, what about the business groups? What's the difference? Or, okay, what do we need something different that nodes group fields, or even the display groups in the nodes types. So I will explain all that. So let's just look at what are the basic facts about business entities. So they're going to come inside fields.json as a new section. So fields.json will have three sections: the fields, the XML structure, and the business entity. Now, every field will belong to one business entity. So if you know the field ID, you will know which business entity it belongs to. Anything that has an identifier is represented by a business entity. So basically, identifiers actually from now on will identify business entities. They're going to just be a field with an identifier. And everything that references an identifier also references a business entity. So they will be used in cross references. Business entities, of course, can repeat, so they can appear multiple times in the notice. And when they do, they will be linked with a node with which they repeat. So as many times the node is present in the XML, it's the same number of times the business entity is instantiated. And currently, the business entities provide information on how to deal with these identifiers. And that was the main reason that we started working on them now. And also they give us some additional information that we didn't have in the SDK about how to record changes in change notices. Now, how are they different from nodes? If you remember, nodes were created. There is some sound. Somebody needs to be muted. I will wait. Okay, thank you. So if you remember, nodes were created in order to tell us where in the XML a field exists. And also, if a field appears multiple times, if a field repeats, the field doesn't always repeat by itself, but fields sometimes repeat as groups. And so we needed nodes to know which XML elements repeat inside the XML. So nodes are about positions of things in the XML, and their existence is driven by needs that are not necessarily identical to the business concepts. We're using UBL, and we're reusing several concepts from UBL, and much of the notice is organized based on things that are external to eForms. So therefore, nodes cannot play this role. And that's why we will introduce business entities as a logical combination of the fields and the links between business concepts. Now, why not business groups? We would be happy to be if we were able to use business groups. The problem with business groups is that they were introduced by the regulation, and therefore they cannot be changed. They're rigid. In order to change the business groups, we need new regulation. And when they were created, there were no fields. There were just the business terms. So business groups basically group business terms in a logical way, yes. In a business-oriented way, yes. But without having undergone the proper scrutiny of an information system. So business groups cannot cut it. So we needed something new. So the business entities are being designed at the implementation stage. We can change them as often as we have to with versions of the SDK, and they can evolve. They will not group business terms because business terms also have their own problems. They similar to business groups. I'll give you an example to explain what I mean. Business terms have their own problems. For example, there are several fields that hold postal codes, and those fields belong to several different business terms, 2 or 3. I don't remember how many business terms we have with postal codes. Well, from information system perspective, there's no point in having several business terms for postcodes. It makes sense to have several fields, but not several business terms. So there are also business terms are also problematic to an extent, and that's why they have been extended with the usage of fields. So in short, the message is nodes cannot cut it, and neither can business groups. So we needed something different, and that's why we're introducing this concept. So therefore, now suddenly you look at the SDK and you say, okay, I have all these fields, and they're organized in 3 different hierarchical structures in different ways. Why? So I'll just summarize them here. So you have the physical model, which is basically about how things are stored, and there were organized fields with nodes, and we use it to generate XML and also read, of course, the generated XML. We have the visual model, which is used in the notice type definitions, and there we have display groups in order to organize fields, and the logic behind that is how do we want to lay out the forms. And then we have the logical model, which is the actual thing behind both from a conceptual perspective, where you have business entities and the links between them. It's not just used for cross-referencing, but it's a simple description, so I put this term there. It's not just for cross-referencing. Now, what do they look like? Okay, this is a little bit technical, but I'm not going to stay too much on it. But if you look at inside fields.json, you will find a new array that is called business entities. And here you see the buyer. You see that it has a name, an ID, a name, a description, a label. The buyer is repeatable, which means it can appear many times. Because it is repeatable, it tells you with which node it repeats with. It has an object that is called change identification, which tells you how you identify changes of fields that belong to this business entity in a change notice scenario. And it tells you that you should record a change in any field of this business entity in a change notice. It tells you that you should not use the instance identifier of the item of the entity that they actually the field belongs, but you should use this constant identifier, which is buyer. Maybe I should use a pointer. In a second. So I was here, right? So it tells you that this, if you change a field of this business entity, you should record it in a change notice. And you should not use the instance identifier, which is the value that is in this field, but instead you should use the buyer. Okay, and here it gives you the information about the instance identifier. The identifiers actually of a buyer are references to identifiers of organization. It points to another business entity, and this is the field where the identifier is stored, and this is a field where a caption can be found. So like a text, user-friendly text for displaying the business entity. I'm not saying more about this. You will find out more, and we're also going to provide the appropriate documentation, and you can ask questions later. Also through the GitHub discussions. I'll show you another one. For example, this one is a business entity about the change section, and it's not repeatable, and it should not be identified in change notice. It would create like a kind of a infinite loop, a Stack Overflow or something. This is another business entity about contracts. It is repeatable. It repeats with this node. You should identify it in a change notice, and you should use the instance identifier. The instance identifier is the value in this field. Then you have a caption here, and when you generate an identifier, you use this key name and this prefix. So that's the basic idea of what is in the business entities. This is not the only thing that is included in the SDK. You also have links between fields. So every field will point to a business entity. And you will also see them in repeatable display groups. But yeah, basically that's it. Nothing terribly complicated. How do I cancel my... okay, I found it. My pointer, all right. Laser pointer off, next. Okay, currently we don't have everything in the business entities. We're only going to include this a few. I'm not going to analyze this this graph now, but you get the basic idea that the business entities basically establish these links. So behind every blue line there is an identifier, and of course an IDREF field. So what are the current use cases? Of course, generating identifiers. There is a current solution to generate identifiers, but it doesn't cover everything. So we will replace it with the business entities. Parentheses, we're not going to remove anything from the SDK. So the SDK 1.12 is going to be backwards compatible. It's not going to break the application. It's just going to add this alternative way of figuring out how to generate an identifier or even cross-referencing. And you will be able to switch from the current way you do things to the new way of doing things at your own pace. So generating identifiers, cross-referencing. So for IDREF fields, to be able to create drop-downs and select the referenced entities in a more user-friendly way. And also, it's clear from what we said that the other use case currently is using the information when filling in change notices to simplify filling in the change notice section. The idea of simplifying it is basically when you change a field in your form, you already know what business entity it belongs to. You have enough information to create the entry in the change section and put the reference there so that your users do not have to track this down and enter this information manually. And so you will be able to create more friendly interfaces for your users to fill in change notices with less hassle than they do now. Now, future evolution. One of the big important roles that the business entities are going to play in the future for the SDK is we will need to align the eForms with the e-procurement ontology, and therefore the business entities will eventually align with the e-procurement ontology classes. Currently, there is no composition or inheritance in the business entities. We introduced only the ones that are absolutely needed for the current situation, which is basically to address the issues of change notices and identification. But we will create relationships, the appropriate relationships in order to use compositions. So one business entity will be composed by others, and also inheritance. So for example, a buyer is an organization, or an organization has an address. Okay, so this is the has or the is relationships. Possible other future evolution of the business entities, which is not yet planned, but I see it as a logical possibility. It will be nice. This is, of course, up to our colleagues in DigiGrow who are doing the policy and regulatory updates. But it will be nice to use the outcomes of the implementation through the SDK and align future regulations so that the business groups actually are aligned to the business entities and are actually used. And also, possibly we could consider using them in a future version of VFX to simplify expressions and make FX expressions more readable. So that's it. How much time did I take? No, half an hour. That was great. Carl, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Yanis. I'm just checking.
How was that?
No, that's great. It's good. You caught up. You caught up. I think we put your presentation online. People can read it again, and the recording for the things. But that's good. Yeah. So yes, the presentations will be online over lunchtime, so they'll be there. Yes. So to clarify, from a release point of view, I know many of you have asked a question, but hopefully I covered it in the previous presentation.
Well, I said I would say it, but I didn't say it, so you say it now.
Yeah, okay, you can correct me. So 1.11, indeed, we want to get it out early mid-April, so it's one we're testing. You can see the scope already. So you can already take it if you need to. From a business point of view, what Yanis just presented about business entities will be added to SDK 1.11 without touching the rules or all the rest, the schema, whatever comes in 1.11. So they'll be the business equivalents of each other. So you can pick the one you want. If you want to just continue with 1.11, you can take it. If you want to take 1.11 with business entities and use those features, which might make things, give you opportunities in your application, you can take 1.12. But okay, what you will know that then in 1.13 in May, the business entities will be inside. So this 1.12 is somewhere in between to give you the choice. Do I stay with 1.11 without them? Do I try them out but with the 1.11 rules? Or do I take them all in 1.13 with some of the additional business changes from the regulation? So that's what we offer as a choices. So it's a little bit confusing to have so many SDKs, but just so you know, sometimes we have multiple SDKs just to give you these choices. So you pick the one that works for you, and you have 12 months or more to adapt to them. So that's the logic of that. I think, Yanis, that's what we wanted to say in terms of releases for SDKs.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
The only quote unquote objection I will have on what you said is, let's not call them multiple SDKs. They're not multiple SDKs. They're multiple releases of version 1. So multiple SDKs could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes, definition.
We create their own impression.
Yes.
Of what they actually are. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that yes, there's business and technical considerations that we give you options for. That's the idea. I have a quick. We've got. What can we do? We started looking at the questions, but we're working through them more over lunch. Maybe one question which is a bit awkward about SDK extended lifespan, so when they expire later. So for all the active SDKs, so 1.6 upwards, we extended by about 4 and a bit months. So we rounded up to the end of the month. So I think the 11th of May plus 4.5 months takes you to September. So the bulk of you are on 1.7. It's by far the most popular one. There's several of you on 1.6, so you have a bit more time. And then 1.8, 1.9, depending when you went live, are more late. The 20th of February, so one question about why is 1.10? Why does that end on the 20th of February? And there's two reasons, partly because we're hoping that after your first upgrade, we can go back to having standard lifespans, that generally each SDK is valid for 12 months. So you don't get too far behind. This year we know is going to be hard. It's a first upgrade and you will all have to assess the impact on you. Once you've done one, you have to be aware that you were basically going to upgrade your SDK at least once a year. That's an assumption. Extended lifespan just gives us this option to extend if needed. The 2023 amendment from December, it says that it should be applied by the end of February 2025. What does it mean? It means that not only we have to give you an SDK by October, that's our obligation to make it possible, but in theory it means that between October and February, everyone must be on that SDK 1.14. So in theory, it means that 1.10, 1.11, 1.12, 1.13 should only be extended till the end of February 2025. So there is a policy incentive to move everyone. In practice, okay, this is recorded, but what does it mean? Because a lot of these changes in the regulation for voluntary fields. So you have an obligation to implement something that has voluntary fields. It's a bit strange. So 1.10 the reason it's the end of February, one reason is we expect that the people on 1.10 will have time to move to a later one. So we don't need to expand the extended lifespan any longer. So we're trying to come back to 12 months. And there is that regulatory obligation that in theory you should be off 1.10 by February 25. So I think the big question you will be asking, for which we don't have an answer, is when will 1.14 be available with all those voluntary forms so that you can jump on it as soon as possible and you can start developing against it. Again, I'm not going to promise anything before October, but we know that has an impact on your planning. So very roughly, I'm thinking in your lifespans, if you're on 1.7, you will not be able to upgrade directly to 1.14 and catch it because 1.7 only runs till September, and it's very unlikely we have the big SDK ready by then. If we're on 1.8, depending on how fast you can move to it, if we make something available in October, could you upgrade to it by November or plan ahead to move it? But yeah, you can expect that you will upgrade this year to 1.10, 1.11, and you'll have to upgrade again in the second half of the year or the last quarter of this year to 1.14 to benefit from the regulation amendment. So I hope that clarifies some of the questions. I know it's not an ideal situation. That will be you. So yes, just a question. Did you understand correctly that in October there'll be 1.14? That's right. With the new regulation, whatever was put in December, so the additional forms mainly. And that by February 25, it will be mandatory. Yes, that's what the regulation says. You only have 4 months to move to that SDK. So it's not, from a regulatory point of view, it's not very useful for any of us implementing. So that's the situation. If we can get something out sooner, the better. Then technically, we will very likely need to extend the deadlines of these SDKs which are running, because we know it's impossible that everyone will be able to move in 4 months. So we'll see what is possible. There is a point that if you're not using those voluntary forms, you might not need to implement everything anyway. You will just have to adapt your selection and exclusion criteria, which will be welcome anyway. Add fields for foreign subsidies regulations, add fields for IPI, add fields for energy efficiency directives, which are all optional anyway. So from an XML point of view, there will be no difference if you don't include them. But the reason there is this regulatory deadline is because those regulations, those directives, want to use eForms for the reporting. So the procurement notices will be used to report on foreign subsidies regulations, on IPI, on energy efficiency directive. So that compliance happens through the forms, like Clean Vehicles Directive already does. So we can expect that we will get more and more fields from other regulation piggybacking on our procurement forms. And because the other regulation says you must report through the forms, we must implement them and you must implement them. And there will always be this pressure to add them. But structurally, they are optional fields in an XML. So that's the reason there is this regulatory pressure to upgrade. Yeah. So that's something our colleagues at the European Commission are also trying to keep track, that there are not some regulation that's saying, oh, put all of this in an eForm. We have to make sure that when a regulation comes out, that it doesn't say this is going to happen overnight. There's a whole time it takes to deploy this and make this available to all our buyers. And again, in practice, as someone pointed out, I think foreign subsidies regulation is if you're procuring over 250 million. So imagine, not that many buyers buy that much from China or something like that, which is what foreign subsidies regulation is trying to protect us from. So yeah, sorry, I went on a bit more, but just to give you the regulatory background to why these changes are coming, some of them. And then there's a whole world of voluntary forms, which, you know, in many countries, you're trying to use them for national publication and align the data. And again, for those countries, the European Commission will try to work with those who are already working with these voluntary forms, because they're available in the extended annex, and make sure we bring in the experiences so we develop something which works for people who are already using them. And then everyone else can benefit from that work. But that's one reason I'm not promising it before October, because there is that consultation to make sure we develop something useful. That the rules are light, but good enough to make sure we have consistent notices. Okay, I spoke a lot, but I hope that clarifies that one. If it's okay, I suggest we break now for lunch. Gives us a chance to look at your other questions. We'll read them back. We have 32 questions. It's not too many, so that's good. we realize that we're past, and possibly we can open up the microphones if we have time, so for those who can stick around, and allow some discussions if there's difficult things which are concerning. If you have some feedback to give us, that would be good. And maybe this year we have more time to discuss more openly. Okay, then we'll see you in a bit over 2 hours time at 2 p.m. Central European time. So you have a 2-hour lunch. Thanks, and see you later. Yes, at the same location. All right, thanks. Hey, hello, and welcome back to this afternoon, the questions and answer section, like we have always done. So I hope you had a good break and fueled up with your favorite coffee for the afternoon. We'll start again with some Slido questions. In fact, a lot of Slido questions. We have many questions for you because we want to understand how you use the SDK. Answer as best you can, but if you don't have an answer, don't worry. Some of them will be quite technical, but it's just to get a feeling of how you're using what we have. So this was our question from this morning, to get a feeling, so not too bad. And so we will go to the polls that ask you the questions. So is it polls? No, the one of the questions, I think it's a poll. Yes, after this one, we should have some more questions. So this one you answered already. Oh no, you didn't answer this one. Yes, please. Yes, please rate our presentations. This is just get a feeling if we're hitting the mark in what we cover. We know in the audience there's a mixture of audience. I know there's some of the audience that are more closer to what I say, and there's another part of the audience who will understand more about what Yanis presents. That's fine. These are eSenders, and in eSenders we have all types of roles, and we do on our side as well. So now the question is, what do you think of the technical presentation? So SDK2, business entities, did it to bring information that helps you? And I see there are a couple of questions about business entities just now. So we'll capture these in the question and answers. So we have 2 hours, so it should be okay. And we should be able to answer pretty much all your questions that you posted. Okay, so this question about how did you use the SDK? So you'll see the questions come in like chunks of 4 questions at a time, and then you submit, give your best guess, read the questions and see how they go. So think you can see that. So this is again this is to understand how you're going to upgrade often. So when there's a new SDK, how do you manage to integrate them? Can you go straight away? Does it take time? Do you really pick the absolute basics because you have limited resources, or you have a system which is quite flexible? So is it automatic? Do you do it all by hand? So how metadata driven do you manage to be? You might have been able to do it, you might not, depends a lot. There's at least 47 different solutions out there and even more in the providers behind the hubs. Again, we want to get a feeling. If it's automatic, how quickly can you upgrade? This is not that easy. And if you do it manually, how long does it take you? So is it weeks or months? We asked a similar question last year. It was a bit broader. Where can you submit questions? In the Slido link, which is just above your question mark. I'll give you a moment to give an idea. Okay, I think, yeah, let's move to the next question, Panos, please. Okay, sorry, we might have, yeah, we got some replies. Just keep it there for a second. So, so indeed, some of you are trying to keep, hold back a little bit until you really need to. Some are trying to keep up and some are up fixing it. So fully automatic is rare, and that's indeed the most difficult one, because even if it's fully automatic, you might need a bit of tailoring to your local situation. Again, fixed update can depend on your environment. Okay, can we see the answers to the next one? So mostly automatic, that's good. We assume full automatic indeed is almost impossible because you have some customization usually. Mostly manual has some work. Fully manual, this will probably be the one that takes you the longest. But it's good that you try to automate as much as you can. So those are encouraging figures, and we're glad that you do, because that's one of the reasons we produce the SDK in a format you can use in your systems. Okay, and the next one, Panos. So these are the fully automatic ones, or mostly automatic. So that 50%, so the more automatic half. So you're taking, yeah, pretty much we can assume everyone's taken at least 3 months, 1 or 2 weeks. That's great, and it's good that some of you have managed to do that. So that gives us a feeling for those of you. And the next question, Panos, is about those who do it manually, or fully manually, or partially manually. So you can automate a bit. This gives you some time. But indeed, we can see this takes longer than the one before. So 2 to 3 months, that's pretty good. 4 to 6, you're already late, and more than 6 months, that is indeed a possibility because you might not have the resources and it's a heavy job. So we'll see one of the questions about how quickly can you move to a new release. This has an impact. Okay, so yeah, the next question is about what we provide for you, which tools, what resources we have, which ones are you using the most. That helps us focus our resources and understand what is useful for you. So SDK Explorer, I don't know if you've had much of a chance, but we give you a few options. Again, if you can help us develop it, that's great. So if you get any solutions that would suit you and we can integrate them in the tool, then we can all benefit. So please get in touch. But that was yeah, with the upgrades and the changes, we knew we had to help you with that one. Again, have you got any resources? Have you got a bit of time you can help us improve that tool? It's not one of our obligations to provide tools like that, but we know it's helpful, and any help is welcome. And the 2 sample applications, the eForms Notice Viewer, the Notice Editor, which give you an idea of how to use the SDK. So they're not fully functioning, and occasionally it's good to get feedback issues you've seen. So we work on them when we can, but we hope they're useful because we cannot make the source code available of our applications. It's too big and cumbersome. So these are smaller applications which focus on the essentials. So if you're using those, let us know. And then the last one is, which are your top 3 resources? Which are the ones you want to use? You can drag and drop them in Slido. And then again, this will help us see where we are. So I think maybe, Panos, we can start seeing the first replies. So, okay, great, very useful. That's a positive. Some of you are just discovering it, so hopefully the few of you who are new to SDK Explorer will try it out and see if it works. For the 10% it's not useful, let us know what it's missing if it's not useful for your needs, or maybe you're not that involved in the process, so maybe that's why. But that's really good. Yeah, thanks very much. So thanks Yanis and the team who developed it, because that's going to support the upgrades. The next one, yeah, could you help us? Probably not, yes. Well, I can't help, I'm not a developer. But that's great, yeah, 41% who can help us out would be really good. So you can also help out just by asking, saying what you need. So even if you're not a developer, that can be a input. Okay, the next one, which sample applications are you using? Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, you will need, most of you will have e-procurement platforms which you are integrating with. So a dedicated editor or viewer might not be what you need. But at least you can get started if you have any questions. If you've got any developers who are still developing, by now maybe you have what you need. So that's good to know. And then the last one is, where should we put our effort? Okay, the eForm specification docs. That's the schema guide, I think. That's a long section. Developer guide, how to use the SDK. And sample applications. Okay, so if we worked on them a bit more, that would be useful. Okay, developer forum. What do we have? Panos, if you could just scroll down on this screen, we just see the other ones which are available. Yeah, great. Metadata reference, that's the web version, the CSV, the downloads of SDK, the CSV downloads, and Java libraries. That's the EFX toolkit. If you're using Java, that can help you use it. Okay, that's good. Right, now how to use EFX. Now we're getting into more detailed questions. Again, you might not know if you're not a developer, and you might think your technical teams do magic stuff. But if you know something, even if you don't know how, you can give us an indication how much you use it for validation. So these are the rules, or visualization for the viewer. So that's how we use them. And it's more, how do you use them directly? If you don't use either, it's because you do your own validation, or you trust our validation to respond to you, or you have your own way of visualizing, or you use our viewer directly. That's also possible. If you don't know what EFX is, that's fine. If you do know more or less or vaguely what EFX is, so it's the eForms expression language, do you intend to use it in the future? So part of these questions will help us understand who is going to be affected by SDK2 and what it's being used for. And if you use EFX, This is more technical. How do you use it? Do you use the toolkit for Java, which we provide, which helps you bridge a gap between the grammar and your implementation? Or do you have your own interpreter? So you use the grammar and you apply it to what you have technically, or you're not sure. I'm not super sure, but I know we use our own toolkit. We eat our own dog food, but that's not everyone who will know. Okay, Panos, let's have a quick look at the questions so far. So, okay, there's a bit of a split. So many of you don't use it, but there's a fair number who use it for validation, for visualization, or both. So, okay, there's a slight majority that I use in EFX. So yes, that's about, a good half of you today would be affected by SDK2. So, yep, we'll keep in touch because it's going to affect you. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. Certainly, Yanis, that's really going to help you as well. So yeah, if you're not using FX, you're probably still not going to use it. And some of you will use it in the future. Okay, so some will join it. So that half of you who are using it might grow a bit, which is good. So there is demand. So we hope it's useful. The advantage of VFX is not, it allows us to express things in a technology neutral way. So it's flexible to the different applications. Okay, and the last one, do you use a toolkit or not? Okay, so for all the Java people out there, it looks pretty useful. And some of you are doing your own thing, which is also good. That's the intention, that you can also adapt it to different needs. Okay, I think many months ago we asked you which technologies you use in Java was the most common, but not exclusively. So we can understand there's other applications, which is again the intention. Okay, I think that was, sorry, do we have more questions? Yeah, okay, let's go directly to the questions. So we'll go to the oldest. Okay, just give me a chance because I will bring up all the answers that my colleagues have been helping with. And I will just read the answers in many cases. So I will appear to have all the answers, but there's half a dozen of colleagues who have contributed, and I will be the newsreader. Okay, so for the first question, if the SDK version is deprecated and a notice is being processed at the time of the deprecation, can you post it with the old one? Okay, just to understand this one, the control of the SDK version is just done at the submission by CVS for each notice individually. So there's not really time, there's no processing time. You submit it. If the SDK valid is valid, it goes into CVS and gets validated at the time, and you'll get the response hopefully quickly. If you send it, after midnight or whenever we switch it off, it simply won't pass. So there's no concept of processing. It's been validated or it's not. Yanis, you would like to say?
Yeah, okay. There must be a cutoff date. And the idea is that you should be ready before that date. That's the idea. So if it happens that you have open notices in the last minute, then you will need to find some other way of dealing with them. So for example, in notices 2, if it changes SDK and there are notices in the previous SDK still open, it will try to migrate them to the new SDK. So that's what the notices 2 does. That's an idea. But basically, there is going to be a date that sunsets. So you have to be ready, be home before dark. Otherwise,
you turn into a pumpkin. Yep. Yanis, just a couple of comments to say that your audio is not too good. So if you speak again,
it's not too good. Okay, I'll check
it's a bit
that.
echoey. Okay, I'll let you have a look while I do the other ones. Yep. So yeah, the SDK version also, there is a case which will happen quite regularly for your users and for you. Imagine you submit a notice on the last day of SDK 1.7 in September, and you stop the notice and you're going to resubmit it tomorrow. But tomorrow we're on a new SDK version, then you will have to upgrade that notice before you submit it again. So it's just really the moment that it's submitted and validated. Okay, so let's go to the next question. If an SDK version is supported till May, what day of the month? Here, please see the presentations and also the active versions page, which was available, because you have the exact date there as well. So I think you were talking about 1.7. It was the 6th of May, and it's now extended to the 30th of September 2024, so another 4.5 months. And the actual validation is done by an API, by the TED API, a CVS active range, and you can query that and know for sure what CVS itself is going to apply. So we'll keep the page aligned, but the truth is the CVS itself. Okay, when do you plan to release SDK 1.11? I think I mentioned it, so early mid-April. So we're testing release candidate 2. How can we easily compare the rules between SDKs? Yeah, especially the older ones and the latest 1.10, because they changed a lot. So in terms of rules, if you're 1.7, which is most of them, 1.7 was pretty loose on rules. So it's relatively easy to submit. 1.8 and then progressively more, we added many rules. And that's yeah, it's a big job for you to do them, depending on how you have implemented the rules. So the SDK Explorer, you can compare fields JSON, and you can compare the schematron rules. So yeah, let's test your audio, Yanis.
Yeah, well, I switched to my phone, so hopefully it's better.
Yeah.
Okay, about comparing rules, I realized after my presentation that I skipped accidentally one slide at the end of what I was talking about, the SDK Explorer. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to add something specifically for the rules in the SDK Explorer. And I saw somewhere below there is a relevant question about whether or not are all the rules inside fields JSON. I see it on the screen, so it's the next question. Now, I will answer them together. So currently, all the rules are not in fields JSON. There's about 30 to 50 rules, I don't know, that are missing from fields JSON, which that is because currently we're not adding in fields JSON rules that are meant to be only for to be executed on the XML, so at the level of schematron. But we will add all those 30, 40 missing rules. And after that, we will also try to add a specific feature in the SDK Explorer. Basically, two features. One will be a summary of what changed between two SDKs. So it will try to automatically summarize in a textual format and or an outline format what has changed. And the other is we'll try to figure out a way to compare the changes in the rules. So this is something that we also know that would be useful for the SDK Explorer. Of course, it's not going to come in the next weeks, but we're certainly aware of this and we will do something about it. The other thing that you can do now is you can use the SDK Explorer, go to the Fields tab and use the search. So if you read the instructions in the search, then you will see that you can use the properties and search for properties that have been added, removed, changed, and so see what, because the properties of the fields basically are rules. So there's a property mandatory, which is it's a rule behind it, all right? Or the assertion properties and other and things like that. So that's the long answer to complement Carl's answer about comparing rules.
That's great. Yeah, thanks very much. That's good. So, okay, so those are the top two answered. So in which SDK will be the fields related to the amendment of the eForms regulation, and which SDK will contain these fields? So that might have been answered before I got to my presentation, I think you have the answer. In SDK 1.13, by May, we have some of them. And SDK 1.14, by October, we'll have the rest. Well, I think you have the answer. Is it only possible to correct a notice posted in the old SDK version in the new SDK version and not in the previous version of the SDK? So this is similar to that first question we had. So a change notice has to be valid in the SDK version at the time of submission. So it's possible if you're changing a notice from a few months behind, and that was in SDK 1.7, and 1.7 is not supported anymore. When you put the change notice in 1.89 or whatever, you might have to add some information to make it conform to the later SDK version. So we don't keep an SDK version valid to allow you to change the old one. When you change it, you have to upgrade it. So it's like a lighter version. In practice, it's a bit like, at least in eNotices 2, I was demonstrating last week and this week, if you have a notice, for example, a contract notice that was published in the old forms, and today you want to publish the result, or we import the notice from the old format, we have a converter which is available to you as well, that tries to populate the fields that are equivalent, and then you have to enrich even the part of the contract notice to make it comply with the eForms structure and rules, and then complete the notice and publish it. And the change, even if you're within eForms, will also have those potential differences. So if you publish something in 1.7 and then you want to change it when you're already in 1.8, you will discover all the rules. The buyer will discover all these rules that they then have to bring themselves in line with those new rules. Okay, so the third question there, will the same limitations for change notices, e.g. no tree structure and references, be implemented for contract modifications, so subtype 38, 39? So we haven't implemented any dynamic rules for contract modifications. Well, as you know, we haven't implemented any for change notices either. But the limitations, we haven't defined them yet. They'll be similar to change notices, but they won't be identical. But they'll be similar ideas. I'm not sure about tree structure and references, exactly what that means, but yeah, in a previous presentation, I think we shared the fields that we proposed could not be changed in a change notice. No procedure type, things like that. Contract modifications would have similar restrictions. You can't change the procedure type in a contract modification and things like that. But the fields are not the same, so the ones which are affected would be the same. But they're not implemented yet, and they won't be done for many months, so no impact yet. But indeed, it would be good if we shared with you what is coming, and you could already implement some things on your side to ensure some consistency. Okay, when will the new SELEX be implemented in the SDK EU? This is a question about the 2023 amendment in SDKs 113 and 114. So I think that came before the presentation. When do you expect to have the extended eForms notices, E1, E2, E4, available in the preview environment? I can understand this question because you would like to test against something. So it won't be very different to what we do today. So the preview environment will have these voluntary forms only once SDK 1.14 is available. So no later than October. But basically the SDK and preview would come out around the same time. There is another question below about pre-release. We'll get to that. Why are there versions of SDK that have a greater lifespan than others? So the default lifespan is 12 months. So that's what we say, and that includes the patches. The expiry can be extended exceptionally. So that's what we're doing this year, is to accommodate the needs for this transitional period when you are updating, you're upgrading for the first time. So we have longer lifespans. Of the list we've shared, pretty much all of them are getting 4+ months, between 4 and 5 months. And there is a question: is why did 1.10 have less? I think that's maybe the one you're referring to. And I'll get to that in a second. So, but pretty much all of them got 4+ months. What are the plans? Sorry, Panos, if you could just get rid of those top 3. What are the plans? That one, yeah, perfect. What are the plans towards enhancing the national notices E2, E3, E4? So these are the 3 below threshold notices: planning, competition, and result. And if you see the presentation, that will be the SDK 114, October, to allow the publication and submission of these ones. Enhancing, I guess you mean adding them to the SDK. So that's the addition, because they came with the amendment last year. Okay, what are your plans towards dynamic rules check-ins? So checking the content across multiple notices. So in the SDK, there is a folder that has some dynamic rules, and it's not clear which ones have been applied. So currently, the only dynamic rule which is actually enforced is the one that checks the dispatch date against the current date. This thing saying cannot dispatch the notice more than 1 day before today. Because that is so that we have 5 days to publish. If you take a day, we lose a day to publish. There is another rule that was there that checked that the identifier of the notice has not already been published, and that worked with a temporary solution that was there, but it doesn't work anymore with the new TED website. So we have to find another solution to enforce that one. So, and there are other dynamic rules, but they're not enforced. So they're just there for illustration or demonstration purposes. So indeed, dynamic rules, there's only one, and the rest is to be added. In practical terms, there's only one that affects you today. A question about reporting an exception from the scope of directives contract. I'm not too strong on the legal basis here, but could you use BTO1 legal basis with value other in this case? And if not, what should you do? You can use other legal basis. So we do have some partners who publish with us who are not directly bounded by the directives. They're not member states, so some international banks that publish with us. But when you do fill in a form, you still have to fill in the rules, follow the rules of that form, which are linked to one of the directives. So if you pick, I don't know, Form 16, you're going to follow the Directive 24 rules. In future, when there's these voluntary forms, the below threshold ones, well, they're below threshold, but they're also voluntary, so you can have above threshold if you're not subject to the directive and still publish. They will be a bit more flexible with fewer rules. But yeah, maybe we can check what the legal basis is for these ones. Okay, the one about, yes, 1.10. So 1.10 has less lifespan than the other ones. It's partly because, well, initially and mainly because the December 2023 amendment requires that the amendment be applied by the end of February 2025. So I mentioned it just before lunch. So in theory, all SDK versions that we publish this year will have to be valid, end their validity until then. 1.10 in general, also what we announced already is we assume that eSenders on a more recent SDK will have more time to upgrade. So SDK 1.10 is more recent. We assume you can catch up, because our aim is to eventually come back to not need extended lifespans and just have a standard 12 months active range. So we have the possibility now with that approach we've adopted with end and patching after 12 months. But the idea is that you do upgrade. Okay, if we go down to the last one in TED schema, if we could just move that up to the top. In TED schema, HTML format and tags in the free text fields were supported for HTML and PDF visualization. In eForms, HTML tags are supported when you see HTML, but you don't see them in PDF visualization. Will you reintroduce this in PDF visualization to make it useful for large text, to make them more readable? So yes, with regards to this visualization, it is a change compared to the old legacy forms. But the data is in XML and it's not treated as HTML. The reason is that eForm schema complies with the UBL, Universal Business Language standard. So wherever possible, it uses the standard XML objects and nodes with extensions which have been applied for the needs of eForms, but it doesn't allow any formatting in the fields. So if you want to be UBL compliant, you can't put any formatting. If you put HTML tags in your notices, they'll just show up as plain text in PDF. And yes, it does make the long text look quite difficult to read. So in UBL, you can't mix the content, so you can't put any tags in. So in general, we encourage you not to put long texts. Okay, encourage your bias. You can't stop them. If we deviate like this, we would have to have some fairly complicated, sophisticated transformations to display something, agree some markup or something like that. So that would be difficult to communicate to tens of thousands of buyers how to enter markup in their content. So no formatting in plain text fields. Jan, when is the SDK going to be aligned with Commission Implementing Regulation 2023/2884 to 884? That is what we refer to as the December 23 amendment. So that's the full legal basis. And as I said in the presentation, it'll be SDK 113, 114. Another question from Jan. So some fields like OPT, OPP are not contained in the eForms implementing regulation, and they don't have more detailed descriptions, so you're not sure you understand them well. And so you suggest adding these to the extended annex to the regulation. Yes, this is an ongoing question. Just for clarification, with the amendment from December, there is no extended annex anymore. The annex table 2 is the same as the Excel. So that's one simplification we can benefit from. We can just talk about the annex or table 2 to the regulation in PDF or Excel. It's the same thing now. More practically, so the fields that begin with OPT or OPP, they were created to support the specific structures of the XML or to fulfill certain technical requirements. So they're not directly related to the business requirements of eForms. So it wouldn't be suitable to include them in the annex in the regulation itself. So in the eForms schema documentation, there's a part that explains the fields other than business terms and explains why they exist and what function they have. So like identifiers to link things together. In SDK 111, we will add descriptions in the SDK. So you will have labels. So there'll be what field, pipe, description, pipe, OPT 123, whatever. So if you want to make them available as tooltips or have some documentation available for you or even for your end users, they will be available. And we should be able to backport them to the other SDKs too. But yes, for me, it's an ongoing, my personal view is the annex tries to define and design data, but it's just a plain flat Excel file with a few pluses, and it falls short of a data model. It's impossible to just take that and assume it can be implemented. So there's these gaps between what people see in an Excel or a PDF and the reality of how it can be implemented. And there's lots and lots of gaps which are being filled with OPT or OPP fields. It's just not possible. There are a few OPP fields for forms which are not eForms. So there's a business registration, 2 business registration forms which you probably don't care about, but they're there and they exist. they're in the schema, because we have a schema for all our forms, and a few for the transport regulation, which is not eForm, but it has some of its own fields. I guess you don't care about those, but just so you know that some come from non-eForm things. Okay, on March the 1st, the expected publication date was added to the search eSend tool operation. That's right, included in the production, and this caused errors in your platform, and you had to carry out an intervention between hours, so an urgent intervention. Are these types of changes being communicated to the eSenders in some way? No, so we communicate through in the preview environment, in the preview page, so we can give you any news if something be fixed or things changed, new features, and so it was mentioned there, but yeah, you might not have kept up with it. If it's a break-in change, we would communicate with you. So, well, for SDK releases, you can watch the SDK. Again, what is break-in for you depends on your implementation. It could be something changes in SDK 1.x, which is not theoretically break-in, but the way you have used the SDK means that it trips you up or your application can't cope with it. This is also similar to the expected publication date. So it wasn't a new request parameter, so it's not something that changed the way you submit it. It was just added as a new attribute in the response. And ideally, your application would not be troubled by additional information in the response if it doesn't have to be so strict. So from an API point of view, the break-in changes would be to remove an endpoint or add a new request parameter, or to change the types of what is requested. So, but yes, we thought it would be useful to add this information, so we added it additionally. But it's well, I'm sorry it broke your particular implementation. But we don't touch the API too often. But that one shouldn't be breaking. Okay, Jan, so the TED email notifications about a notice publication earlier than it really occurs, which is confusing for your users. So also, can we improve the TED notification content to have the procedure name, the date it was sent to TED, etc.? I think there's two things. We think we were struggling to understand if you got an email before publication. That's very unlikely, because by the time the information gets back to eNotices 2, it's because TED itself has triggered the confirmation it's publication. What could be happening is that your buyers are getting the expected publication date, which is new. So this happens quite shortly after submission. So your buyer will submit it, it gets validated. We send a message saying it's submitted, you've passed all the technical tests. If there's no lawfulness check, which is 99% of the cases, you get another email saying the expected publication date is this one. So normally this is when you get a confirmation that you're going to catch the next issue, or maybe 2 days later. And then you will get a separate email when the notice is actually published in the official journal on TED. So you end up getting 3 emails. So maybe this new second one is causing confusion. So please check. Then apart from that, we do want to improve the content of the email notifications in general. So that's an ongoing job. And we hope to have that fairly soon in coming back from eNotices 2 to improve the information and even the text themselves. Yeah, those emails are a little bit, some of them have been quite concise, and we have to provide more useful information for the buyers. And as I said in my presentation, if you provide the notice author email, that email address will get this information. Okay, is there any plan to improve the publication cycle to publish on weekends or publish on notices received on Friday before Monday? So indeed, if you send something on Friday, the next working day is Monday. You have to wait over the weekend. No, we have no plans to change the Monday to Friday rate we have today. Already we're publishing 2, 3, 4 days faster than before. So I think that's a big improvement. Nothing to do with eForms as such. It's more Well, thanks to the automatic validations we have now. So all this pain for rule validation, the gain is you can publish as soon as possible. You don't have to wait 5 days. So we're not planning any further improvements or speeding that up. Just take this opportunity, not directly related, but if you know the official journal release calendar on TED, you can see the dates of every issue. And with the new TED website, you can download that in CSV or Excel or PDF. So, for example, in eNotices 2, when you publish, when you submit something, you have a choice do you want to publish as soon as possible? So today or tomorrow, or tomorrow or the next day would be what's normally available. But you can also choose a preferred publication date. And in that option of preferred publication date, we only offer dates that really exist in as an official journal release. So for example, Easter Monday, the 1st of April this year, there's no release, there's no issue. So we wouldn't offer that as a preferred publication date. If someone chooses the 1st of April this year, the expected publication date will be calculated to be Tuesday, the next day, because that's when the next available date is. So if you want to know that calendar, you can actually get it in a more machine readable format if you want to. So yeah, the next couple of months we have Easter Monday, the 1st of April, we have the 1st of May, we have the 9th of May, Europe Day, and Whit Monday, Pentecost is the 20th of May. So you have a few gaps in the next couple of months. But yeah, Monday to Friday, we're sticking to that for now. I think I've gone a bit too far. I have a question from Jan about translation. It's okay, I'll read it out. So Jan, during the Czech eForms implementation, you prepared a complete translation in accordance with Czech legislation. So the current translation contained in the SDK looks like it was done via Google Translate tool. And can we include your translations in the next SDK versions? Yes, we can try. So as I mentioned, we're going to be in touch with all the member states. So Jan, I think you are probably or very close to you. It'll be we'll be in touch with you to get the Czech translations. You don't share your language with anyone, so we will trust your ones. About machine translation, there are a small number of labels where we do use machine translation. So the new labels we sometimes put in machine translations while we're waiting to get the human ones from European Commission translators. But even if there are human translations, we know that many terms are not really aligned with the national transpositions or your terms or your practices. And sometimes the words just, there's jargon. Some of the structure, some of the words might be the structure of the rules as well. So if you see conditional mandatory rules, those messages can be a bit clunky because it says this field is mandatory in this form under this condition, colon, and then the condition. So it's not, doesn't read as easy text, but that's the way the rule is constructed and communicated. But yes, definitely, and we'll, if you've got Czech ones, we'll send you along. Probably a big Excel, you can put them all in and we'll import them in and we'll trust you haven't deviated too far from the meaning of each text. The descriptions of the business terms are taken directly from the regulation, so that normally it should be okay, but maybe the regulation itself was badly translated. It has happened. Okay, after installing, I think this is similar to one year before. So after the new release, search eSend tool. Yes, same as the other one. So expected publication date was added, and this caused trouble to you as well. And how did we communicate with you? This was we mentioned before. So okay, there's more than one of you got tripped up by that one. Okay. When will be the recordings on the eNotices 2 webinars be made available? Yes, that's parallel meeting sessions. Well, we've got one tomorrow. So last week we had a beginner one. Tomorrow we have a more advanced ones. So we will I've just reread the question. We will email the participants of the webinars. We will add the links also in the help page of eNotices 2. So the section already which has the September, October, November ones we did last year. Yeah, that's for eNotices 2 webinars. We'll share those. And then it'll take us a couple of weeks. We got many questions from end users for eNotices 2, which we'll try to consolidate and also make available. For the eSender for this workshop, we'll make them available on the agenda tab of the page. The 2 PowerPoints from this morning are there already. So the recording takes a couple of days, and then maybe next week or just after Easter, we'll be able to put this summary of questions. They're not too many, as not as many as previous times, so gives us a chance to answer them all. Why are the maintenances and potential downtimes in TED Productions environment only announced a day before? Be nice to know at least a few days in advance. Yes, that's a good point. So our aim is to announce downtime in production at least 2 days before. So yeah, it's not just the day before. And to limit the unavailability to 7 until 9 Central European time. So catch it earlier in the morning. But unfortunately, we have had a couple of short notice deployments that fell short of this aim. So yes, that's not what we should be doing. Indeed, for production, at least a couple of days, and even in preview, a couple of days would be good. Okay, the day before is good. So we'll try to improve that and plan a bit better. Is it valid in a contract notice to refer to previous planning which has only been published nationally? So the unique ID provided is not found in TED. This doesn't work, so it's not valid. So the references to previous notices can only be the ones published on TED. So with the publication number of TED, so 8 digits hyphen the year. Or if you want, if it's eForms, you can actually refer to your previous notice with the notice ID, the long UUID. If that's what you're working with inside your application, that also works for eForms. Less readable, but also valid. But no, we cannot link to where you've published nationally. You would have to mention it in, yeah, additional information or a free text field that refers to it. So the support for eSenders unfortunately doesn't work well. So if we just move up a couple of questions. The response times are much too long. If you even get a response at all, why is it not being improved? My suspicion, I mean, right now we've only got a couple of open questions from eSenders. So we have some open issues, but not many, and we're on top of them, or we know them and we responded to you already. It could be that if you've emailed the TED help desk, that your emails got lost because they're very busy with eNotices to web users. And also now it's getting a bit better, lots of questions about the new TED website. So February was very heavy for the help desk. It's getting better now. So it could be that an email went into the TED help desk and you didn't get a reply yet. So we'll see with them if they can separate the eSender ones from the eNotices to users or TED website. It should be getting better, well, but again, if you let us know, because as far as we're concerned, we've responded to everyone, or we know who we owe an answer to, and you know that you're expecting an answer. If you haven't replied still, that's strange. We normally reply. So contact us again. We do answer every question that we get. But the help desk itself might have taken some time. Okay, this one, where could the SDK2 complex rules be seen? I don't know if Yanis, not sure if we have much there yet.
Yes, we don't have them yet. They will be available in a future release of SDK2 when we have them. And we're not going to work on the complex rules before the summer based on our current plans. So we're working on the view templates, but for the complex rules, we're not ready yet. So as soon as we have something, then we will have a pre-release of SDK2 containing them, and we will let you know.
Okay, that's great. So look out for Alpha 2, Alpha 3 or something. And also, yeah, so Cyril, which SDK the dynamic rules will be implemented? SDK2. So it's a bundle. That answers the next question about dynamic rules. Okay, yes, then a question which is going to be a big deal this year. When do we expect the pre-releases of SDK 114 to be available? So this is the big SDK that has the 6 new forms and the energy efficiency directive. So I have to repeat that we can't promise to have an SDK 114 that's going to be ready before October. If we get anything earlier, that would be great. But right now, can't see how fast we're going to be able to progress. What we can share earlier would be a release candidate, a bit like SDK 111 right now, before the final release. But that would only come a couple of weeks earlier. So, we get a release candidate when we finish the work and we start testing with our applications. So we deploy them in our applications, in our acceptance environment, and that version you can see. So you can use it like that. So yes, pre-release would be release candidate, and I would say a couple of weeks before the final release in October. But yeah, we'll keep, if we can gain any time there, we'll let you know. By June we should have a better idea where we are, how we're doing. Okay, now a question about using user notices themselves from an award notice with several beneficiaries for the same lot. It is obligatory to specify a leader, even though this is not always effective. Yes, so in terms of rules, it is necessary to identify the leader if there's more than one economic operator tendering together. When you do your tendering party, if there's more than one, but it's not related to the number of winning tenders in a given lot. So, Said, I'm not sure if that's a question or it's just your question if the rule is useful or if the rule is working. So, get in touch with us again. But that's how the rule works. The next question about October. So, did you understand correctly that in October there will be 114 with a new regulation by February 2025, and it will be mandatory? Does it mean you only have 4 months to implement 114, including the national adjustments? So yes, I'll repeat it again. I've probably told you in many different ways, but just to repeat it because it is very important this year for you. So legally, yes, that is the reality. So yes, the intention of the amendment is that all member states comply with the amendment by the end of February. In practice, it means that you or the eSenders must be on SDK 114, which will only be available in October, and then you must have it ready by February. As we saw in your questions before, even if you started on, if we had something on the 1st of October and you started, the fastest of you might have it in a couple of weeks. Many might be just about ready by February, and some of you will be taking 4, 5, 6, more than 6 months. That's a reality of some of you. So the reason it's mandatory is because of the legal reporting requirements of the Foreign Subsidies Regulation, the International Procurement Instrument, the Energy Efficiency Directive. That's, in a way, that's the regulatory pressure to have it. If you don't have those fields, your buyers cannot report on what they're legally bound to if they're procuring things that is subject to those regulations. It is possible that you choose not to implement the voluntary forms, so the 6 new forms. That's what makes the SDK big. It's 6 new forms that new rules, new view templates, new notice type definitions. That's what's going to take up the bulk of the work. If you don't use those and you don't implement them, and you just do the other few fields, you could be compliant with 114. Just don't use the new ones. That is one way that maybe you can be compliant and still meet your deadline. I'm just thinking of ways to make it a bit easier. In reality, as I said, I guess there might be some extension of the SDK lifespans, the extended lifespans, to help some of you comply. But yeah, plan ahead to upgrade to 1.14. So check out that Excel with the track changes from the Commission. You can see the fields which are coming. Apart from the new forms, the fields are relatively manageable. They're nothing exceptional compared to what you've done already. And the rules will not be too heavy. Already in those guides from the Commission, you can see the ideas about the rules, and they're relatively simple rules. I say, if I say that I have a measure of the foreign subsidies regulation, then I have to fill in the description or something like that. They're fairly obvious consistency checks, so we shouldn't be making life too difficult. So yeah, that's for that. When you're at the bottom, so about those regulations. So thank you, Anonymous. That's great. We even have the names of the regulations, the numbers of the regulations. And again, as I said, so foreign subsidies regulation, foreign grants, that'll be in 113 by May. IPI, what's the other one? 2022. The International Procurement Instrument normally should be ready by May, but it depends if the European Commission adopts the implementing acts on time. So it might not be there because the regulation alone doesn't have all the information. There's an act which will have like something like the code list of the values that can be entered. So if that's not available, it'll come later in 1.14. And Energy Efficiency Directive will come in 1.14 by October. So that one comes later. So that last one. And I think I was trying to check over lunch. I think Energy Efficiency Directive also needs an implementing act for some parts, but they have a bit more time. So okay, then I see new questions coming in. I hadn't seen those. I might hand these over to you, Yanis. You've been looking at the questions already. These are that came in just before lunch, just after lunch. So all yours.
Where can we find information for the business entities? We will release the documentation of business entities together with SDK 112. We're still writing it, so it's not there yet, but it will come in the next, I don't know, days, weeks, together with SDK 112. Will the use of new business entities become mandatory in the future? If yes, when? And in that case, if you need to adapt your applications, and if there is a sample code, just give me a second to find here this question. Okay, so look, there's no sample code yet, and like I said, we will have documentation. We will try to add the developer guide for this. Basically, there are some things that are already in the SDK, all the tricks we do with the ID schemes, if you're familiar with those, that are going to be replaced by the information contained in the business entities, but we're not going to remove anything from SDK1. So while in SDK1, you will not have to change the applications, but when we go to SDK2, yes, the obsolete implementation for generating, not implementation, the obsolete information for generating identifiers will be removed from SDK2. So yeah, we don't need to worry about this until SDK2 comes. And because you will have both information sources while in SDK1, you will be able to make the transition. You have enough time to make the transition from using ID schemes to using the scheme names, etc., from business entities. Then, will there be recordings? I think I think,
Yes.
Carl, you have an answer from Jenny there, which is
Yes.
there's a URL. Yes, go on.
Yes, they'll be on the website where you registered. So on the agenda, we have links there.
Okay. Then
In
there is
fact,
a, yeah. I don't know if
Panos, if you could just move up 3 questions. Yeah, the philosophy one. Yeah.
okay, now this one I'm not sure I understood. So you say, what is your philosophy handling different eForms versions? Now, what do we mean eForms versions? There is only one active regulation at the time, so there is only one eForms version. If we mean different versions of the SDK, then we do not intend to have more than 2 major versions of the SDK active in parallel. So there's not going to be an SDK 3 until everyone has moved to SDK 2. When SDK 2 comes, there will be in parallel SDK 1 and SDK 2 until everyone has moved to SDK 2. And then we will consider SDK 3. What else? If you're talking about minor versions as different versions of the SDK, then minor version is not different version of the SDK, it's the same version of the SDK, it's just incremental updates to the current version. So 1.12 will be the 12th incremental update of SDK 1. It's the same version. So I don't understand the question, the philosophy for handling different versions. Minor versions, we have them active in parallel, as we know. Major versions, we will have 2 major versions active in parallel. It is necessary for a while until everybody moves to the next major version. And the last part of the question, convert all to latest version. I don't understand what you mean convert all.
It could be
If you want, yeah.
the application itself. So how, if like, well, but just say I could add something for eNotices too. So if I'm in eNotices 2 and I published my contract notice 6 months ago in one SDK, and now I'm going to publish a result in a newer SDK, the front end, well, the application does convert the older one to fill in the form, the
All right.
same
So now you're
fields that
talking
you
about
want
okay.
in the application itself. Yeah.
Yes. So okay.
How do you store
Okay.
things?
Here, if you're talking about an application that fills in a form,
yeah,
we assume that the application that fills in a form will always fill it in the latest version that it has implemented. All right. It will not fill forms in several different versions of the SDK. So yes, like you said, and we said earlier, I think eNotices 2, we just convert it to the latest version.
Yes, and some of that work is pushed onto the buyer to complete the forms.
I mean,
so
if there is something that I didn't understand in this question, if you could rephrase it, I will be happy to provide more information. Then where do we ask questions about the effects if you don't understand the effects expression from the docs or Antler definitions, etc. These are technical questions. Feel free to address them to the GitHub developer forum, and we will try to help you. Will there be a possibility to download a delta of what changed between versions from the Explorer so that we could scan the changes automatically via, for example, a script? That's a good question. Look, conceivably, we can do it. We never thought about this, but it's not a bad idea. The problem that the first thing that comes to my mind as a quote-unquote problem is we need to figure out what the delta will look like. Okay, you want to process it with a script. So we need to figure out exactly what this diff that you are going to download will look like. So what I would suggest is, if you have an idea like this, add an issue in the GitHub issues of SDK Explorer so that we can have a conversation about it, or even add it in the developer forum so that others can see it more easily, possibly, and contribute. And then after we define how this is going to work, yeah, we can consider it. I mean, if it's helpful, especially if somebody wants to work on this, we will definitely help implement it. Then next, we've been looking to implement EFX to execute directly on visual model. Okay, inside for10, but found the development burden too heavy to justify the costs right now. Are there any plans to use an EFX interpreter made for JavaScript and TypeScript? So, okay, the short answer is no, we don't have any plans. We have also considered the same thing for eNotices too, but decided to currently improve the solution that we already have, which is runs in Java in the backend and uses Ajax to communicate with the front ends. However, we would like a lot to get an opportunity and the ability to have an EFX toolkit for JavaScript and TypeScript. The thing is, we cannot, under the current constraints that we have, it's unrealistic for us to make any such promises or plans. So if we could find some kind of collaborative solution, I mean, if people really are interested in this and we want to, you're willing to pool resources to pull this off, yes, we will also, it will be more feasible for us to chip in and help everybody to get this done. But by ourselves, I don't see this as realistic. I cannot make any such promises currently. Yeah, it would be excellent if we could do that. Now then, the next is.
I can take this one. So
Yeah.
from Cyril, we experiencing quality issues on the already submitted forms, and that's a reason why the rules are more or less loose. Yes, it's true. For example, SDK 1.7, which most of you are using, doesn't have that many rules. It's pretty easy to satisfy relatively. But then we see that notices are missing information, and in some cases it's quite important, because if the buyer hasn't linked the tendering party, the tenderer, the contract, the result, and put everything together, you don't see a winner for the process. And so we see a notice which is a result, and it's not complete because the rules didn't force the buyer to finish the job. So indeed, when we started adding more rules in 1.8 and later, it doesn't increase data quality. So there's another question later about the quality of the rules themselves, but we'll get to that in a second. In fact, it's the next one, sorry. So how do we validate the schematron rules you add? So the past releases have added a flurry of new rules, indeed, since 1.8 we've had a lot, but they're not always compliant with national laws or have been impossible to satisfy without sending incorrect data. So has the process been involved, or can we expect more of the same? So we have in the past, before we went live in November, we had hundreds of rules that had been provided by ex-colleagues of the Commission, which in theory should hold together. And we didn't go live with all the rules because there were just too many, and it was going to be just too heavy. And so we've been added them progressively. So where were we now? So 1.11 was the last of those rules which we had in draft. So we had them, in the pipeline, and we put them in. 1.11 ones are relatively they're not too heavy. It's, like I said, just basic consistency between 2 or 3 fields. The part about national laws, that's very tricky, because there are cases out there which the rule seems to make sense. We put it out there, and then we find out that in national legislation it doesn't apply. Personally, I was very surprised. There was one case with the restrictions on CPV codes that we undid. That in fact the directive said one thing, but the transposition didn't impose it. So I thought transposition could make things stricter, or tailoring make things stricter, and in fact it made it looser. So the rule was too strict because we'd followed the directive too closely, and we had to remove it. So yes, we got rid of it. Great. In the meantime, until we got rid of it and backported it, many notices had to get around the rule or had trouble. So is the process going to be improved? So we are not going to add that many more rules anymore. So that's the source of new rules should slow down apart from what's needed now with the new fields. So it'll be encapsulated by what is new. As a process, speaking for myself now, I think it will help that the Commission, DG Grow, have that GitLab environment where they can put out issues, or what we call change requests, and consult with the member states from policy people point of view. So if you see some of the issues, they say, well, okay, some are quite simple. It's a code list. Can we change this code list? And people are saying, in my country, I need this. In my country, I need that. And we can see that the conclusion, people will say, okay, it seems to work for everyone. Then at least if we put in a new code list or we change something, we have a better confidence that it's going to work for everyone. And that hasn't happened in the last few years for some of these cases. So that would be my preference. So if you see what has been done for IPI and FSR, indeed, these are not, technically these are not big things, but my hope is that the Commission will continue working this way, saying, here's some new changes, here's a bit of policy background, here are the business terms, and here are the rules that go together, and all the member states and even yourselves, you can go and have a look and say, that makes sense for me. And so by the time we implement it and put it in the SDK, there'll be some background to why we got there in the first place. So I'm hoping we'll get something for selection and exclusion criteria, because they will change in an SDK. It's not too complicated, but some guidance on that. And as I said, there was also some discussion about framework agreements, dynamic purchasing systems, which help the buyer to fill it in, but also help us to have the rules that make sense, because it would have been a little bit described where it comes from. So yes, I can't guarantee it's going to be all smooth, but from our point of view, we're not going to add that many rules apart from the ones that you see come in a bit more clearly now. So I hope that the first year of rules is a bit less bumpy now. Okay, that was a bit of a long answer, but indeed the rules is hard work. So if we go to the last one, if you move a couple more up. So the addition to the change notice questions. Contract modifications have a change notice identifier. If two modifications are made to the same contract award notice, should both references point to the original contract award notice, or should they have a chain in change notices from the second modification to the first contract modification? Okay, my colleague is helping with an answer. So when there are two changes that are applied to a notice at different moments of time, they must be done sequentially. So each notice should refer to the one that preceded it. So the first change would refer to the original notice, and the second change would refer to the previous change notice. So this isn't change notices. You will republish a contract award notice. In the case of contract modifications, the reference should be to the latest notice, which has basically the contract which is currently active, and it's just the one you're going to change. So it also depends if you're changing the same contract or different contract. So you could have a contract modification. You could have one contract award that has one contract in it. You have a change modification that points to that one. You could have a separate contract modification that points to another contract, and they both point to the original contract award notice because you pointed to two different contracts. Then if that contract changes again, you have modification to that contract. So it depends a bit what you're trying to link together. But yes, you can end up having lots of contract award notices and lots of contract modifications. Okay, we're getting to the end. So the eSender section in eForms is optional at the moment, and it'll use. Do we plan to remove it from the user interface? Yes, it's I think it's a role, eSender role. is available in the two roles as a service provider, and that is linked to the organizations. Yeah, it's a bit awkward because the front end offers you to, as a user, at least in eNotices too, that's also the case. The buyer can actually say, my eSender is this organization. In eNotices doesn't make sense because in a way the eSender is eNotices to itself. We have talked about making the eSender role mandatory in the XML. We haven't done it yet, but maybe for 1.13 in May, we could make it mandatory. And this means every XML has the organization with eSender information. Many of you do it already. And then indeed, we should really remove it from the front end. So the application would add that XML when you submit the notice, and it wouldn't be a front end thing. But we should, yeah, see how we can improve that in the front end, the user interface. You can always adapt the SDK a bit yourself and say, don't display this role, don't make this role available in the front end. Is there a place where you can find an overview of all the eForm related forums and events? TED eSender, TED Reuser, TED eNotices to users. Just thinking. I mean, normally these are all 3 different audiences. You might qualify for all 3 audiences. So TED eSender is true. On the TED website, on the new TED website, we have a news section, and there we do announce these events. So that would be the place. Go to TED, look at TED News, and you can see what's coming up. For the eSender ones, we invite everyone who has a developer portal profile. So if you exist in developer portal as in a preview and production, we will email you so you can't miss out. And once you've got the link, you can keep up to that to the page. Yeah, I'm just looking. We publish them on the TED website in what's new. So that's probably the best way to go. Yeah, I was just checking if it was there. And the final question, it's a clarification. Do you understand correctly that the new E1 to E4 voluntary forms will only come with the 1.14 October SDK, or will parts of the new voluntary forms be available earlier? It's the first part. So we will do all 6 forms in one SDK. That's our current plan. We're not going to privilege any voluntary form earlier. So the idea is to put everything in one big SDK, and everyone can move to that one in one go, even if it takes us a bit longer. And also, it also gives time, as I said, the Commission to consult with member states already working with those forms, because they were visible in the extended annex. They had never been like legalized or formalized, but they were available. So some member states already started using those structures. So we want to consult with all of them, and we're not going to go with one form before another. Partly because also if we ask, there are member states who want one and not the other, and others want a different order. So we're going to treat everyone the same way, and we have to wait. Okay, thank you for all those questions. We'll try and write them up. And just a couple of questions to wrap up a little bit earlier. So this is an open question on Slido. If you'd like to respond. It's just a couple of words, just to get a feeling of what benefits you come. I mean, we've done all this work. There must be something to it. Can we find some benefits? Yeah, nothing. We're not expecting all of you to be enthusiastic about eForms, but there are some benefits out there. The trouble is the benefits don't always accrue to the eSenders directly. Yep. Job security. Okay. Yes, there's uniform way. That's true. We have simpler updates. Okay, that's good. Lots of work, yes. Increases time work, yes. Increases the workload in terms of lawful math validation. Yeah, for us, more expenses. SDKs, SDK, XML technologies, yep. I know on our side we replaced all the applications, so we had some benefits of that. And the automatic validation meant we could, we didn't need any manual validation. That's our benefit. For you, it means we validate quicker and publish faster, but that's not directly related to the eForms itself. And yes, it should ultimately simplify the provision of tendering solutions. So having a schema that has voluntary forms that could be used at national level could be better. And the framework is clearer overall, but lots of work. Does statistics suffer? Yes, we know some numbers are down. More workload, possibility of errors. The error, indeed, if the users don't understand how to fit in, the data quality is not going to be better in the short term. And the view templates is the maker's hard work. Okay. So how do you use the SDK? Does it help you? I mean, the SDK is a huge difference to how we worked before. Before we gave you a schema, we gave you a few Excel sheets, there were some XSLTs, and that was about it. So now you get a pretty serious package, which puts more pressure on us to provide good content because we know you're going to use it directly. But in some cases, if you were doing things more manually anyway, it might not make it so much easier. So yes, right track. Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't make things any easier. Fair enough, and it creates more problems if you're trying to adapt it. That can be true. If you have improvements, keep them coming. We know you actively tell us, so that's fine. We need to know. That's why we asked many questions today to try and capture what is important to you. Okay,
so 1 in 3 have a negative opinion about the SDK.
Yeah.
It either creates more problems than it solves, which I would like to know about what problems it solves and what it creates, so that I can compare them and understand this answer. Otherwise, I will tend to wonder whether it is just complaint or reality.
No, there's a reality. For me, the difficult part is to split what could we have avoided given eForms. That's for me, that's a difficult part. How else could we have expressed all of this?
Yeah, but the question was about SDK. It was not about the whole operation. Okay, eForms. I mean, there are several different ways to discuss the situation about how e-notification is evolving. But yeah, the question was more specific about a specific approach on trying to get the implementation underway. Anyway, okay, just getting looking at the message that 1 in 3 is on the negative side.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So is the vehicle wrong or is the driver wrong?
Of course, statistics are always read 2 ways. 1 in 3 is on the negative side. 7 in 10 on the or 2 in 3 anyway are on the positive side. So yeah. There are different ways of looking at it. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and this is the short answer. So the roadmap, Yanis, the roadmap's very popular. So that's for us. Definitely.
It means that you had the right focus lately, Carl. The roadmap.
Yeah. So the last couple of weeks, Yanis and I and all the team, we've been trying to figure out what goes first in which order. So there was a lot of readjustments of what comes out. SDK Explorer, that's great. We quite like it. Roadmaps, information, positive mindset. Yeah, we'll we'll keep going. And well, actually, I really enjoy, but I shouldn't say I enjoy these sessions, but I appreciate being able to get in touch with you and to get your feedback, because it's a long job. It's pretty hard. And we know it's not just us. We know it's happening 47 plus times out there. We know that everyone is doing the same thing. And the sessions I've had recently with the users of eNotices too, straight. Some of them don't hold back, and they're just basic users, so they just have to deal with it. So it's quite hard. So let's do it at the late start. Yes. Extra time to get your coffee in. We'll try to avoid that next time.
Carla, I also
Yep.
see that for some reason, we are personally trending by name there.
Well, we do all the talking. Well, we could share. I mean, we should. Our colleagues are a bit shyer, but we have lots of questions.
Yes.
There's at least half a dozen people contributed to the answers we gave now. And
but thank you, because this is a compliment. Right? If you pick us out by name, it's a nice compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, keeps us going. I'm on holiday next week, so that's fine by me. Maybe that's in enthusiasm. And it's sunnier up here, so I hope you are also getting a bit of spring. It helps. The winter's been quite long. I think, okay, I'm glad we finished a bit earlier. One option, does anyone want to stick around, raise a hand, make a comment? I don't want to use up the half an hour we have, but if you want, this could be a moment to share. For those who want to leave, this is the end of the workshop. And we'll leave the survey open for later. You can fill it in afterwards. It's going to be open for a few days just to get, this is the standard feedback. But if anyone wants to take the floor, open their mic. Yeah, just to keep it open, just so you don't feel it's all just us talking. For those, I just post again. It's in a few places. If you want to come to Brussels next month, it's also online. So this is a superpowers event. So if you can make it to Brussels, that'd be great. Yanis and I and several other colleagues will also be there. Some of you are presenting. It'd be nice to meet you. At some point this year, maybe we'll have an eSenders workshop in Luxembourg, but it's been a bit too busy to think about hosting you as well. But we have, when you've moved to a new building last year in Luxembourg, the old post office of Luxembourg, and it's very exciting. The Grand Duke of Luxembourg inaugurated our building yesterday. So you can now join if we manage to organize a date that could be done in person. But we'll keep the option open because it would be good to meet in person, those who can, but we'll continue working online as well, so we can maximize attendance. Okay, we'll wrap up now. We won't keep you any longer. We have some upgrades and SDKs to do. So thank you very much, everyone. See you on the 20th of June, and have a good spring. Thank you.